This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Liv Constantine. Liv is the pen name of sisters Lynne and Valerie Constantine, who are Wall Street Journal and USA Today international bestselling authors with over 1 million copies sold worldwide. Their books have been praised by USA Today, The Sunday Times, The Washington Post, People Magazine, and Good Morning America, among others. They join me today to talk about their career and latest novel, The Senator's Wife. Welcome, Valerie and Lynne.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love having you both here. And I'm going to ask you the question that I ask everybody as we begin these. And I'm going to shoot it to you, Lynne, first, for the reason that you were the first person to join me today.
Oh, okay.
Where does your story as an author begin?
It begins back in 2000 when Valerie, or even a little earlier than that, when Valerie and I collaborated on a book called Circle Dance, which, like many first books, was a big compilation of sort of our family, about two Greek sisters and a family saga, that sort of thing. I didn't start, as a young child, even though I was always a big reader and a storyteller. I mean, my favorite thing was to play with my dolls and make up all kinds of soap opera dramas with them. But in terms of an author, that was the first thing. That was the first book that sort of, put pen to paper.
Yeah.
Again.
How about you, Valerie?
Well, so it's sort of a similar trajectory. I have to say that one of the most fun things for me too was when we were kids playing with dolls and making up stories. And in fact, a good friend of mine who I used to do that with most said to me, I should have known back then that you would be a writer one day, because you would make up the most bizarre stories and all of these intricate little things going on between people. I've always loved writing and reading, and that was always my favorite subject in school. But I guess I just never thought that that could actually be a career. That was for other people, for these geniuses who could just write like that. And of course, there are those geniuses. I don't claim to be one of them, but even we who are, sort of average can still be writers. Even if we're not Dickens or Shakespeare.
Sure. And Valerie, when did you start writing in general? So it says like Lynne was back in 2000, but how about yourself?
Probably the same time. I mean, I had written, I always wrote, but never anything to be published. So that was the first foray into the publication world and, the world of
rejection.
Trying to.
Well, that's true. I mean,
there.
Rejection comes with the territory.
Sure, it does.
It does. But I'm curious, Lynne, what was there some kind of inciting incident that got you interested in writing, back then?
So I think it was the fact that Valerie, again, that was always a subject that I excelled in. And we were reading a lot of family sagas at the time we would read, my mother and my aunt and Valerie and I would often read the same book and then talk about it. And they were a lot of times different cultures. And there was nothing about Greek families. And so, except for maybe Zorba the Greek, which wouldn't really count as a family drama so much. And so that's when I just said to Valerie, why don't we write one? And I think it was partially a desire to leave a legacy for our children, because neither of us are married to Greeks. And growing up with two Greek parents and who were very involved in the Greek community, there were a lot of things that we experienced that our kids were not going to experience, as well as knowing our grandmother, was from Greece and sitting at the table, listening to her speak in her accent about old stories. So we really wrote it as something so that our children could look at it one day and say, oh, this is sort of our culture and where we come from. And that was how And then once we started, I think, the writing bug sort of bit, and we just continued from there.
Yeah, you live with the sting when that happens, right?
Right.
How did you find working together on this, Valerie? Was it challenging? Was it a pure joy? Like, how would you characterize working with your sister on this?
Better say it was pure joy.
It was pure joy. That's pure joy in the very beginning. I mean, we all know that writing, there are parts of it that are pure joy and parts of it that are just darn hard work. But I have to say that overall, writing together makes it easier work because there's somebody that you can talk to about the characters, about the plot, and bounce ideas off of. And as we bounce ideas back and forth, and more bubbles up and comes to the surface, and so I think that enriches the story and enriches our characters. So all in all, if I had to choose between writing by myself or collaborating, I would definitely choose collaborating. Now, that's not to say that I could collaborate with anybody, but we happen to be a very good combination, and we do it well together. I mean, we enjoy it. So, yeah, pure joy would be more than the other end of the spectrum.
How did you divvy up responsibilities? Was it something where, one person would take a chapter, another person would clean it up, and would you trade off chapters like that? Or how did you find a way of working together to make it work?
I mean, our process has evolved. So when we wrote our first book, after that book, when we got As Liv, we'll say, which was later in 2014 or 15 when we started working together again. And so for The Last Mrs. Parrish, we split the characters primarily, although I did still write many of the chapters in Val's part and vice versa. But for, overall, but the way that book was structured, it sort of made sense. And then we realized with subsequent books where we were having alternating chapters as opposed to one whole section, from one point of view, that we both had to be completely invested in every single character and be able to write it that way. So we speak in the morning, and we decide who's going to, who feels like writing what scene. And then we go off separately and write. And then we email, and then we edit each other's chapters, and we speak again every day. And it kind of goes that way all the way through first draft. And we edit the book probably 2 or 3 times all the way through before we even hand it off to our publishing editor. So by that time, and it's track changes back and forth so we can see what we've done. It's not uncommon for there to be one sentence that's half mine and half Valerie's. So it really does become, a combination, and hopefully no one is able to distinguish between who wrote what.
Yeah. Because I imagine the trick is like keeping one consistent voice, throughout, unless you're taking different points of view.
Right.
But, that's got to be a trick. But it sounds like you've worked out the system where there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of back and forth. And I'd imagine by the time you've got that first draft to a point where it's going to your editor, that the editor, I wonder if it makes their job a little easier because it's been touched so often. Has your editor ever shared anything like that? Like it's a little bit more finished, or you're laughing, so maybe not.
Well, we haven't. I'm trying to think. I mean, it's usually like for the senator's wife. I will say when we handed that over, she did say it's very clean. That's and really, I remember her saying it would really be ready to go. But I mean, I always want to make it better, and she did. She made it that much better. So I think hopefully that's the case. Yeah, I mean we've never had anybody say, wow, what happened? This is pretty terrible,
and go back and start over. But there are always good suggestions and edits. I mean, we never get something returned with no red on it.
Yeah, we're not Lee's child, right?
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, that's their job and that's their skill. And editors normally do improve what you've done.
We have sort of a running joke and I don't do it anymore, but I used to say we wait for our edits, and I would say, I don't think they're going to be like that extensive. And Valerie, they don't say that. And then of course they would be. So now we're getting ready to hand in our next book. And I said, I'm not even going to guess what it's going to be like. We'll just wait and see.
I said, good. That's good.
Well, what can you share about the senator's wife?
So The Senator's Wife, even though it sounds like it's a political thriller, it really is not. It's much more a domestic thriller, similar to our other stories. And it centers on Sloane. Well, really, two women, Sloane and Athena, but Sloane is our protagonist. And she is remarried after a tragic loss of her husband, married to his former best friend, who also lost his wife in the same tragic accident. So when things, begin off, she's sort of trying to balance starting her life again and being happy with her new husband. And she's been dealing with lupus for the past 20 years. So as a result, is having had hip surgery to do a hip replacement. And so that's where the second woman comes in, Athena, as her home healthcare worker. And instead of getting better, though, she goes into a lupus flare and she begins to get worse and have additional symptoms. And over time, she starts to worry that maybe it isn't the lupus making her sick, but maybe it's someone else. And so we're not sure if it's Athena. We're not sure, there's some other characters in the book that you're wondering about. And then there are some other, obviously, twists and turns and some political undertones going on. So that's kind of the setup for the book is, who can she trust? Can she trust her own mind, or are there people in her life doing things and making her, sick?
I'm not getting a good vibe about this Athena. I'm telling you that right now. My spidey sense is tingling, and something tells me that she might be up to no good as I hit my microphone here.
Right, might be right.
Valerie, is there anything you would add to that?
I would say that probably Lynn went as far as she could without giving anything away.
No spoilers.
There's some nice spicy characters in it. There's a lot of Washington high life, a little dinner at the White House. And so it's interesting. I think it's an interesting look at Washington. And as Lynn said, it's not a political thriller, but there certainly is politics involved. So it has a little bit of something for everybody.
Sure.
Right.
I imagine it's hard to set a novel in Washington featuring a senator and his wife without touching on politics at some point in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what were you going to say?
I was going to say, and I think it really has our favorite twist so far. So,
I think so too.
this is the one where 98% of the people have said to us, I didn't see that coming at all. Whereas the other books, even though we've loved the twist, some people have been able to figure it out. And, so that's satisfying too, when you're able to pull something off that really turns everything around.
I've been able to do that once. And I've tried to replicate that magic. And I think I've been trying too hard, honestly, to replicate that, because the first time I pulled it off well, I literally was watching a friend of mine get to the page and just throw the book across the room.
Oh, wow.
And said, I can't believe you did that.
What book is that? I'm going to have to get that one.
I'm not plugging my own book here. That would be bad.
But you should tell us which book it is.
It's called Uncorking a Murder.
Writing that down.
Yeah, me too.
But what's the secret to executing a great twist? I mean, so many of the people who listen to the show are authors themselves. If you had advice, if somebody came up to you, like some MFA student came up to the great Liv Constantine and said, how do you execute such a good twist? What would you tell them?
Wow. Well, I guess I would say it has to make sense. I mean, and again, we typically do start with a twist and then build around it, but not always. And I mean, I'm not the one who came up with this, but what is that old, the saying where it has to be completely unexpected, but yet totally conceivable, or I'm getting it wrong. But I would say it has inevitable, like
Inevitable.
that you can go back and look at something and the seeds were there along the way. But I think what makes it the most satisfying, not something just outrageous that comes out of left field and you say, how does that even make sense? But something that really hits somebody right square in the forehead. And they're like, oh, I should have seen. How did I not see that? That's what makes a great twist. So I don't know with the magic, obviously, because we would love to replicate it every time as well. But I think, and it is helpful to Valerie's point. We'll go back and forth, and oftentimes we'll start here, and then we'll keep talking and maybe even joking, and then it ends up here, and it's all of a sudden just the brainstorming process and the back and forth, I think that comes up with that. So do you have any?
And I think the other thing about a twist is that a lot of it is perception and how you try to steer the reader into believing something that is not true. And see, that they're thinking one thing and seeing it going off in this direction, and really you're going off over here. And so that even makes the twist even more, that aha moment, like, oh, wait a minute, I thought this was happening, but really this was happening. If
Yeah.
that makes any sense. So what the reader is believing, you want the reader to believe something that isn't really true.
Yeah, you have to be
Exactly.
somewhat diabolical about it, and
Right.
like planting some seeds, but not overselling them.
Right.
And just not doing like the obvious, like I remember reading some things and it's like, okay, well, that's just lazy, or like I remember if you remember the show Dallas, I can't remember what season it was, but
Oh,
who was
yes.
it when they killed Bobby and then they brought him back because it was a dream sequence?
Yeah, that was
They just like,
horrible.
I know
Yeah.
that's just
And the
terrible.
show, that was the end of the show, really. It's the end of its popularity. People were
Yeah.
furious.
Yeah.
Better.
That is lazy. Yeah.
Maybe they tried to replicate Who Shot JR a little too much. I don't know, but
Yeah. No, but I think like my favorite, if I think of The Sixth Sense, right? Like that was just such an amazing, like I can't imagine anybody saw that coming, or if they did, then
So I mean that was so well executed.
Yeah.
I mean, just from a writing perspective and just a directorial and acting perspective, it's like, wow, that was great. And
but it made perfect sense when you
went back and looked. Yeah.
right. Or at least it made 6 sense.
Yeah.
But I could look at that, his body of work, and it's like, I think he's always chasing that, it's like, to some extent, maybe that's true. And not to,
I think it is. We talk about that too. Like, it feels like certain writers are now, they have one like huge breakout book. And even if others do as well, there's one that sort of, maybe you only get one or two of those. I don't know, where that's the book. And then you think of them, and even if they've written 10 more books, it's never quite the same, right? Magic as that. I don't know.
Right. It's true.
Right.
Fortunate, but
we strive and hope that, get there.
Yeah, very, very true. So do you feel like you've done the Greek community a plus with with that first book you wrote? And I don't know, I mean, Athena sounds like a Greek name to me.
She is Greek.
So
yeah,
she is Greek.
You have to beware of Greeks bearing
gifts. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I always like to wrap up with some fun questions. And these are really just designed to get to know my guests a little bit more. And I'm going to pick on Valerie first on this one. No, these are not hard. Not yet anyway. Did you have, growing up, did you have a favorite TV show and things that you'd like to watch on TV or movie?
I love Lucy. And it's still my favorite TV show.
It's
brilliant.
Comedically brilliant.
Yes, absolutely.
The physical comedy, just the and if I have my facts correct, that was the first TV show to ever show a toilet.
Really?
Yes, I Love Lucy. That is one of the useless facts I have. I believe so. And of course they had twin beds. They didn't do the full or king or queen bed yet.
No, they didn't.
Because God forbid people thought that married couples shared a bed together.
Well, and I think it really was quite something that she was shown being pregnant.
Oh yeah,
that was a big deal then.
Sure. How about you, Lynn? Growing up, favorite TV show?
Brady Bunch.
Was there one Brady, male or female, that you identified with more?
Well, of course, I wanted to be like Marsha. I don't know if I identified with Marsha. That's who I wanted to be. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, and that just seemed like the perfect family at the time, right? Here, I mean, fortunately, our parents were together and we were all. But I was like, oh no, that looks really fun. They just
divorced parents, stepbrothers.
They never mentioned the other parent.
Never. Never. I always wanted to know, like, who Mr. Brady's ex was and who Mrs. Brady's ex was, and No, there's, they had Joe Namath and who's the
Davy
guy from the
Jones.
Monkees? Davy Jones on the show. But you can't bring in the former, mom and dad.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that would have been more interesting to me.
Yeah.
All right, the Brady Bunch. There you go. There, your sister never threw a football at your face, did she, Lynn?
No.
Okay, making sure.
But my brother would have. I could see Michael.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Didn't want life to imitate art at all. Lynn, how about music growing up? What'd you like to listen to?
Well, I loved the Beatles all the time, and then gosh, Billy Joel probably. Anything sort of pop rock, I guess. Yeah.
Did you ever get to see any of Billy's shows at the Garden in his residency over the past few years?
No, I did see him in Maryland, but I haven't been to a concert. I have to say, I'm not really a huge fan of big crowds, so I'm not much of a concert person. Yeah.
Fair enough. There you go. Valerie, how about you? Favorite music growing up?
Music, of course, the Beatles. When I was in high school, Beatles, came shooting out. I loved ELO, Electric Light Orchestra.
Oh, Jeff Lynne, he's fantastic.
And Willie Nelson. I love Willie Nelson.
Very eclectic taste right there. Did you have a favorite era of the Beatles?
I don't know how, I'm not sure that I know what years or eras or what, but I did love when they came out with a White Album. I thought that was really, just all of their music was so innovative. It was always different. And I think it was such an enormous talent that they had to just keep reinventing themselves with their music.
Yeah, totally. Very, because you can listen to their stuff from the 60s and it's nothing like the 70s, but
it's all fabulous.
But it's all fab, right?
Yeah.
All fab.
Valerie,
How about, do you have a favorite place you like to read?
That's interesting. Well, if I could do it, my favorite place to read would be on a beautiful veranda looking at the ocean with a nice breeze and a palm tree waving. But that really isn't where I live. So I sit in my sunroom in a nice comfortable chair, and that's my favorite place to read.
All right. Lynn, how about you? Favorite place to read?
the beach, and it's not a palm tree, beach, but we're close to the beach on Long Island Sound. So as long as it's not too hot of a day, to take where I'll sit out on the patio with a book and read.
Yeah. Lynn, how about a favorite place to write?
My office. So where I am now, I used to write before I had this. I would take my laptop and I would write, especially when my kids were younger and I would be driving around and I could write in a coffee shop or anywhere. But now I come up and in the morning at 8:00, shut my door and just work.
Yeah. Very cool. And Valerie, do you have a favorite place to write?
I do the same thing. I write at my desk. It's not really an office that's closed off, but I'm alone here. I never could write in coffee shops because I get way too distracted by people and what they're saying and what they're doing or what they're wearing. So that I have to be alone to write.
I would put AirPods in because yes, people would,
Yeah.
Right.
And last but not least, I always call this the letter to me or dear younger me question. So Valerie, if you could give your younger self some words of advice, what would you tell a younger Valerie?
Oh, I would say to just not let fear of failure or fear of not doing it perfectly stop you from what you want to do. That, it isn't, you don't have to be perfect right out of the gate. And so keep doing what your dream, keep your dream going and, be fearless.
Be fearless. That's what Taylor Swift would say too, I think. How about you, Lynn? Any words of advice for your younger self?
Yeah, similar. I would say find your passion. Don't just take a job because it pays well if it's not really what you want to do. Obviously you can't sit around and not wait for something to happen. But I would say spend more time really figuring out what that is and do whatever you have to do to have enough energy to pursue that. So, whether that means taking something less arduous as a job, if that's not your goal job, so that you then have the energy to pursue nights or weekends or whatever, so that you come to it sooner. Because I feel like I worked for a long time in the corporate world, and I was successful, and it's not that I hated it, but I didn't love it. It wasn't my passions. And I'm in a situation where oftentimes I look forward to Monday more than Friday, and I think that's a real gift, and that's what I would.
Yeah, I would like some of that special sauce. I'll tell you that much. I have to ask, because both of you mentioned making up stories with the dolls in your childhood. Do you remember some of the crazier stories that you came up with these mysterious dolls? And were they voodoo dolls? I'm just curious.
They were not. They were. Well, I did play with Barbies too, but what I'm thinking of is I had these beautiful parents when they would travel. They would bring dolls home. And I did have this one doll who, I don't know, it looked like she was pregnant. I don't think she was supposed to be, but the way her stomach was. And she was the maid. And the husband got her pregnant. And the wife was all upset, and they were fighting and arguing. That's the only one that stands out in my mind.
Quite a standout.
Was anyone named Athena? Were any of those dolls? No? Okay. Just making sure. Seeing how far back this goes. Valerie, how about you?
There was always backstabbing and fighting and infidelity and all of these things that you sort of look back and think, how did I know that at 10 years old or however old we were? But I guess maybe we were watching
other stuff besides.
Right.
That's right. You're watching Dallas and Dynasty.
Right.
Exactly, right.
And
Falcon Crest.
Yeah. I loved Dynasty.
Dynasty, right.
That was Linda Evans, right? Dynasty.
Yeah. And Blake Carrington, John Forsythe. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. Right. Well, there we go. We've taken a nice walk down memory lane here. So
yes,
I'm sure The Senator's Wife is available wherever books are sold, but you can tell me if I'm wrong about that.
You're right.
Okay. All right. And I always like to plug your local independent bookshops. So if any of you listeners there want to find out what's going on with this Athena lady, go to your local indie bookshop and pick up a copy. Or if you can't, bookshop.org is a good resource as well. And of course, we've been talking to the sisters who make up Liv Constantine, Lynne and Valerie Constantine. Do you have any social media or a website that you want to share with listeners so they could do some digging on you some more or follow you?
Yes. So our website is livconstantine.com, and that has all our social media links, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Twitter. I think that's it. Yeah. And Liv Constantine too is our Instagram and Twitter handle. But again, if you go to the website, you can find all of that.
It'll all be there. And thank you for the reminder, because I have not added Threads yet to my list of ways of getting in contact with people. So I have to do that, because that's
easy. It'll just take all your Instagram, bring it right over.
Oh.
Not hard. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg. Lynne and Valerie, thank you both for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you
for inviting us.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.